Okay, yeah, it works, good. So if everybody can grab a seat, and we may have a few people come in, but I do want to say thank you for coming to the first phase of this process. This is the first time that we have done this with the assessment methodology. And so there's going to be, this is the first part of a phased process, and Christy's going to talk more about that. But thank you very much for coming, and we're excited to start this with our assessment methodology, which we haven't done before. I will say that the cards Heather passed out cards to folks on your way in, and if there's anybody that at this point knows that they're going to make a comment during the listening session that we're going to have after the presentation, we can if we could collect those now, if you know that you're going to make one. That way we can get an idea of how many folks want to speak, later on. But if your question develops later on through the presentation, feel free. Mary over here will take those up from everyone. But again, thanks for coming. Okay, Christy, I'll let you start.
So, hello everyone. My name is Christy Williams. I'm an ecologist here in the Water Division at ADEQ. So today we're just going to go over a little bit about the assessment methodology review. This is the first time, like Sarah mentioned, that we're doing the public listening session stakeholder work group process for this. So we're very excited to receive input, and we hope that if you don't give input today during the session, that you will still have until the end of the month, and we hope to receive any input that you may have regarding the review process of the assessment methodology. So the goal of the listening session, not only today but through October 31st, is to gather input regarding the 2016 methodology, which is the current methodology on the books. We will take all input received during the input period, share that with a stakeholder work group. The stakeholder work group, we plan on having anywhere from 2 to 4 sessions, however many sessions it takes, to revise the 2016 methodology, come up with a new assessment methodology for our 2018 assessment cycle. So there's probably some people in the room who are very familiar with our assessment methodology. There may be some people in the room who are less familiar with our assessment methodology. So an overview for that is ADEQ, the state of Arkansas, is required to assess the waters of the state every 2 years. We assess them to support, to see whether or not they're supporting their designated uses and attaining their water quality criteria. This assessment methodology, the actual document that we're going to be revising, contains the processes by which these assessment procedures. So the assessment methodology is prepared by the ADEQ staff. Traditionally, this is just all done in-house, and at the end of it, it goes up for public comment. And again, this year, we're receiving input on the front end, not just leaving all that toward the end of the process. The assessment methodology must be consistent with regulation number 2, which is the water quality standards for the state of Arkansas. It must be scientifically based, and the assessment outcomes from the assessment methodology determine attainment or non-attainment of the state's waters. So this is a general kind of schematic of the assessment process. So we receive water quality data from outside entities, as well as water quality data that we collect in-house. And a couple of assumptions are made with this schematic. We're making the assumption that the water quality data meets quality assurance QA/QC measures. So we have a list of those QA/QC measures in the assessment methodology. So that could potentially be one thing that you provide input on. So assuming that our water quality data meets our quality control requirements, that data is put through the appropriate assessment methodology. And then after that assessment methodology, after the assessment happens, then that water body segment will either show that it's either impaired or not impaired. And again, this could be for a water quality criteria or for designated use. If the water body is impaired, then it will be placed on the 303D list of impaired water bodies. So I made the comment that we're making an assumption that we have good, appropriate data. But what if we don't have any new data? And we actually get asked this quite a bit. So if we don't have new data from one assessment cycle to the next, then the previous assessment is simply carried over to the current assessment cycle. And that would either mean that the water body would remain listed or remain unlisted. And again, this is if there's no new data to change the previous assessment. And what if we don't have any data at all? There are thousands of miles of streams in Arkansas. We have a lot of water in the natural state. We just simply cannot collect data on every single piece of water in the state, even pulling in data from outside entities and agencies. So if we don't have data, it's really simple. We cannot make an assessment, and so therefore that water body is unassessed. So we don't say that it is attaining its water quality standards. We don't say that it's not attaining its water quality standards. We just simply have to say that that water body segment is unassessed. So I'm going to run through a quick example of a shortened data set and how we might assess a water body for pH. So earlier I said that the assessment methodology has to be consistent with Regulation 2. So in Regulation 2.504, we have our pH standard, which states that pH must be between 6 and 9 standard units. And then our assessment methodology says that if more than 10% of the qualifying data is outside of that range, that criterion of 6 to 9, then that stream segment would be listed for a pH impairment. So if this were our sample data set, a couple of assumptions is that this is all good quality data. It's passed all of our QC requirements. And if we also make the assumption that this is all the data that we have on a particular water body segment, then as you can see, 3 of the data points fall outside of our 6 to 9 criterion. In that case, that is greater than 10%. And so this particular water body segment would be placed on the 303D list of impaired water bodies for pH. So hopefully that's, and again, this is a very general assessment. So again, we're here to revise the assessment methodology, to seek input on revisions for the assessment methodology, and we're going to do this in a 3-phase process. So today is part of phase 1. It's our public listening phase and input gathering phase. So today we're having our public listening session right after this presentation. The session closes on October 31st, so any input that you would like to contribute, we just ask that you get that to us by October 31st. And these were available, these information sheets were available at the sign-in desk. So if you didn't get one of these and you'd like one, you can feel free to pick one up later, but this will have all the web addresses and physical addresses that you need to send your input to by October 31st. After the input period closes on October 31st, ADEQ staff will put together a summary of all the input received, and then we will make that summary available on our website. After the public listening session and input period closes, then we'll go into the Stakeholder Workgroup portion, or phase 2. We will have a Stakeholder Workgroup meeting. We'll have hopefully 2 to 4, depending on how many we need to have. And at the end of the Stakeholder Workgroup, we will provide a summary of all the input that we gathered in the Stakeholder Workgroup. After that, we'll go through an official public notice. We'll gather comments, we'll put out an official response to comments at that time, and hopefully get our new assessment methodology finalized in time for our 2018 assessment cycle. So again, some of these dates may change a little bit. Yes? Cover that in about 2 slides. So the Stakeholder Workgroup, the goals of the Stakeholder Workgroup is to review and discuss input to help ADEQ with recommendations for the 2018 assessment methodology. During this, we will discuss input from this listening session as well as the rest of the current comment or input period. We received some relevant comments during the 2016 303D comment period. We received some of those from citizens, from outside entities, from EPA, and we will also have those for the stakeholder work group to consider, as well as some input from ADEQ internally. We you look at the assessment methodology, and we can see some things that probably need to be revised. So who can be on the stakeholder work group? The stakeholder work group is going to consist of about 30 individuals at the invitation of the director. We're going to make every attempt to have a balanced stakeholder work group, and so it will include members from local, state, federal government entities, industrial, municipal, and utility entities, conservation and environmental entities. So the actual stakeholder work group, the people who are actually going to be sitting at the table, will be director invitation only. However, the stakeholder work group meetings are open to the public. We will have seating available for any member of the public who wishes to attend, to listen in on the stakeholder work groups. So what I would encourage you to do if you are not invited to sit on the stakeholder work group is to, and we will have the stakeholders listed on our website, and maybe a person that is going to be on that stakeholder work group would best represent you. And so you can get with those stakeholders and certainly discuss anything that you would like for them to bring to the table during the stakeholder meetings. We encourage that. So how can you get involved? Again, we have our webpage with a listserv, and just show of hands, this has been out there for a while. How many people do we have here who have already signed up on the listserv? So we have a few. That's great. We would like for everyone to raise their hand to that question by the end of today. We'd like for everyone to get online and go ahead and subscribe to that, because that will keep you up to date. We will put everything on there. So, but on our website, you can keep up to date with our review timeline should the timeline change. All press releases will be on there. Also, the 2016 assessment methodology as it exists is on there for you to download. And then any other relevant documents associated with the assessment methodology are available as well. And this is just a quick screen grab, just showing you the green arrow on top where you can sign up on the listserv. It's very easy. There's a drop-down menu on the bottom when you first log on to this page. That will not look like a drop-down menu. It'll just be that little purple dot with a link. It looks like a link, but if you click that link, it'll have an entire drop-down menu. And again, this web address and all information to access all this is on this information sheet, should you need to grab one of these on your way out. Also, again, if you want to make a comment today, either verbal or a written comment, please do fill out one of these comment cards and get that to Mary right over here, and that way, if we know that we have people who wish to get up and speak, we'll be able to allot enough time for that. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah, and she's going to take some questions about the review process, and after a short question period, then we'll open it up for comments. Thank you very much.
So we have allotted we have this room from 2 to 4, but I figured that there'd be, we figured, I'm sorry, not me, but we were thinking that there would probably be some questions for those who maybe aren't familiar with assessment methodology, or maybe questions about the process and so on. So we did want to allow maybe 15 minutes or so for any questions that anybody had, and then we could go into the listening session. Yes, Mr. Watkins?
Can you give us a list of who was involved in the stakeholder work group previous review session?
So that's a good question. We do have, so I'm thinking about the stakeholder process that water has done. And really the most extensive one that we've done is the regulation number 2. the last triennial review. And I believe that all of that information is still up on the website. It may still be up on the website, but that would give you a good idea of the spectrum of folks that were there. As far as the department carrying out stakeholder processes, I think the most recent one had to do with the Clean Power Plan. And so, but I would say primarily we would be working off of what for Office of Water Quality, what we did with Reg 2, and I think that should be there for the last triennial review on the website. But nevertheless, rather than you moseying around on the website, we can certainly get you that list of folks that we did have. Is that okay? Okay. Yeah, Stan. Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So I'll work from your last question. I'll work from B to A. So we do not have we don't have that. You know, going back to what Christie had here. Well, where was it? Hang on a second. Where was that? Well, what we're going to end up doing is, I'm sorry, that was it right there. So what we're going to do is, we're going to be using, for the stakeholder work group, is going to be utilizing the listening session input. And then all the from today, and then until October 31st. In addition, we had several extensive comments. We had extensive comments on the assessment methodology in the last 303D list, okay? So we're going to include those. And then also the ones that we have been looking at that we need to revise to. All of those will be gathered in a packet, and they're going to be set before the stakeholder work group. So we're leaving it open. There are some changes that, the comments that we already have that we know we're going to be putting before the stakeholder work group. And again, all of that, that packet that we're going to be giving the work group members, I would be on the website. We're going to be, it'll be forthcoming, yeah. And so then going back to question A, as it relates to approval, the assessment methodology is not approved by EPA. It is not approved by EPA. And that's something I was explaining to someone earlier before we started. Some states carry out a rulemaking for the assessment methodology. Oklahoma, I believe, does that. But when we do not. Some states do, some states don't. There is no. There is not. So EPA doesn't approve it, and if it so happens that EPA believes or thinks that our assessment methodology is inconsistent with the reg, because those have to be married, okay, tightly married. And so if that's not consistent, then they'll put the assessment methodology aside, and they will interpret our regulation and determine the assessments that way. And that's based on what they've done in the past, so, yes. Okay. Is it a question or statement? Okay.
So during the last 303D process,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed like some of the, I'm a layperson in this area, but it seemed like some of the streams met the technical definition that they should be put on the list.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like there was some subjectivity interjected in there, like, well, we haven't been looking at it long enough, let's look at it for, and so, so, I mean, when she presented in
Mm-hmm.
that session, in that slides earlier, it looked very objective.
This.
No subjectivity whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. So, there is to maybe dip down in the weeds, the one thing that we didn't put up here, which, not that we're trying to hide it, it was just, we're trying to simplify the process, because it is it is a complicated process. The further you go, the more complicated it gets. But there is a monitoring period that we use. So, and with each parameter, there are seasons, and so all that comes into play in the assessment. So, for example, let's see, this 18 list, the monitoring period would be from March the 31st, 2017 to 12, right? April 1st, 2012, for example. So, because we have to stop somewhere, but we're continually overlapping actually in the data that's reviewed. There's overlap, but I can see how to the layperson, because there are several layers to this, to assessing the waters. And those layers come about by reg, or they come about by EPA federal regs, EPA guidance. So there are layers to it that we have to carry out, be it reg or guidance, that can change from parameter to parameter. And so I can see how one could think that there may be subjectivity in it, but it is a clear-cut process. It is a black and white process, and so I think, what I hope is, by making this this time, for the first time, making this so open to everybody, and having so many different times and phases for public participation, that where there is an appearance perhaps of subjectivity, that we make it very objective to anybody. Because what is completely objective to us may not seem objective to a layperson. So maybe if we all sit around the table and we're able to communicate, ADEQ perhaps is able to better communicate our confines as it relates to reg or guidance, and the rationales are understood, I hope that the objectivity would come forth and the subjectivity would fall away. That's a long answer, golly. But anyway, I just wanted to, communicate with you about that, because I do agree that was an issue in 2016. And, that feeds into why we're doing this as well. Not wholly, but because people have been requesting this for a long time. Yes, Teresa. Mm-hmm. Yes, okay, so, no. No, yeah. We do have, I think you're referring to nutrients, and there are other narrative criteria that we have in the reg. I think you're referring to the nutrient narrative, and no, the only numeric criteria for nutrients are in the hopefully upcoming final review approval, okay, for Beaver Lake. And those are those translators, those are those translators that are in place for that criteria. No, yeah. I'm talking a lot, so I wasn't done yet. Sorry, but so as it relates to any type of nutrient criteria that the department, with the Office of Water Quality, would be moving forward with, all of that is just just an internal review currently, right? And right. Maybe by the end of next year. This is we envision after all the internal review that's going to be necessary for that, we envision an extensive stakeholder process for that. It is controversial. It will be, it always is. I was in a meeting with EPA just this last week, and it was, it's controversial for every state, and it's an extensive process with nutrient criteria for every state. But we've completed our work, but now there's crunching, data crunching, and internal reviews, yeah.
So a draft review will not be available until the end of next year?
Well, now, Teresa, you're trying to pin me down, and I can't, I'm too far down the totem pole to give you a concrete answer. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would hope, I really hope by the end of next year, I really hope. Because we have worked hard, and everybody in the department knows we've worked hard, so we're hopeful about that. But thank you for bringing that up. Yes, Alice. Yes, at that time, we will. As it relates to nutrient criteria? Right. So, I mean, there's a whole host of options that are available they're limited as it relates to streams, of course, but there are different translators. There's, biomass, chlorophyll A. You could do total phosphorus. You could do total nitrogen. There are different options that are available that other states have utilized, and that research and literature, contend are good measures are good indicators to measure. So as far as, I don't know what those are going to be. What I'm saying is that there were several different options available for criteria to develop criteria on other than phosphorus and nitrogen for states. So I don't know what they're going to be. And right, and that's exactly what we have. That's our position as well. EPA in the early 2000s came out with criteria, which were level 2 ecoregions, which we did not, think were appropriate. So I agree with you on that point, Alice. Yes, Pat.
Could you go over some of the high points of what you see as some of the big changes or major changes checking out
From this process?
from this process of making assessment methodology compared to existing ones that are?
Oh, well, I don't know. We've received comments, in the past. I know that we received comments on the how we assess for nutrients. We received extensive comments from this last 303D list in the previous one. When we first went out with it, there was a lot of comments. There were a lot of comments about that. Turbidity could be one as well. I can see minerals is always a fun topic. Caleb's shaking his head at me. Right, yeah. But that's part of the reason that we've started this, is to actually get input. Because what I think may be a hot topic may not be at all. That's proven to be true in the past. Yes, Anna. Say that again. I'm sorry. If I'm interested in advocating for something. Yes. Mm-hmm. What would be the most useful information to provide during this process, or is it even sort of up for discussion? Right. That's because it is criteria. Any change in criteria falls under standards changes, and like Reg 2 changes, for example. Assessment methodology is dependent upon the reg itself. So we're not changing the reg here. The reg is what it is, and the assessment methodology has to follow that. So that is a very good point. I don't know if that was your intent to point that out, but that is true. So you could comment on the nutrient criteria, and how we need to change it, or how we need to have numeric nutrient criteria, and that would be great. But I would say save those for the next triennial review in that stakeholder process. That's my opinion on that. Okay. I think, thank you very much for your questions. I think right now what we'll move into is the listening portion of this phase. Does anybody have any cards that they would like to, that's just so we can get an idea of how many people wanted to give input today. And again, if you don't want to give input today, you know, we have until October the 31st for this input phase. Then there's the stakeholder phase, and then there's the yet another public comment period. Does anybody have any comments for today? Great. Okay. Well, okay, so Teresa, if you can just come up here, where we're gonna like kind of turn things around and do a hearing type format, but I don't think we'll do that. You can just,
I guess I'll be the one brave soul here.
so you can just, if you can just, I don't know, just like,
Can I stand behind here?
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
okay?
don't get preachy though.
Oh, I won't.
I'll try it. Okay, good, and then we're recording, is that true? We're still recording, okay, good, I just want to make sure, thank you. Watch for the wires.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, my name's Teresa Turk. These are draft comments that we're providing today. This is probably like the first in a series of what we'll be providing, but I thought I'd take the opportunity, since you all are here and you're listening. It is a listening session. So my comments are made on behalf of the Ozark River Stewards. We are an organization that has over 500 supporters, and we're very concerned about the Buffalo River in particular, but all Arkansas streams in general. So I'd like to point out that the EPA has identified agricultural runoff as the #1 reason for degradation of streams, creeks, rivers, ponds, and lakes in the United States. Northern Arkansas has traditionally been blessed with really clean streams until recently with the introduction of large concentrated animal feeding operations. CAFOs present the greatest risk to water quality because both of the increased volume of waste and the contaminants that may be present, such as antibiotics and other veterinary drugs. These are serious environmental and public health importance and crisis. So based on available data, generally accepted agriculture or livestock waste management practices do not adequately or effectively protect water resources from contamination with excessive nutrients, microbial pathogens, and pharmaceuticals present in the water. This was from a study of Joanna Burkholder and a series of other scientists in 2007. For these reasons, it's imperative that ADEQ implement revisions to their water quality standards to increase protection of Arkansas waters to the visitors to the state and improve and maintain healthy aquaculture resources. So I'm not going to go through everything that I have here, but I will hit sort of the high points. We advocate designating all the tributaries of the Buffalo National River to be designated as ERWs, Extraordinary Resource Waters. Right now, there's only two. There's only Richland Creek and Falling Water Creek. Falling Water Creek runs into Richland Creek. I'll give you an example. The Spring River, 5 of its main tributaries are all designated as ERWs. So the Spring River, which has less tourists, less of an economic driver for the state, an economic engine, has more protection than the Buffalo National River, our only national river in this state. So we very much advocate changing that designation of those tributaries to ERWs. We've seen high E. coli values. We've seen huge algal blooms this fall. And so clearly this river is in trouble and needs as much protection as possible, as quickly as possible. Second, we'd like to advocate expanding the primary recreational contact season for the Buffalo National River, the Kings River, and the Mulberry River from March 1st to October 31st. So we believe that this primary contact recreational season needs to be expanded. And we base that on people are using the river, they are on there, they are kayaking, they are canoeing, Climate change is happening. We've had a very, very warm fall, and so people are still out there engaging in these activities where they come in contact with water. Third, we'd like the state to create an anti-degradation procedure and methodology for implementing the policy. Under the Clean Water Act, 40 CFR 131.12 requires the development and adaptation of a statewide anti-degradation policy and to identify the methods for implementing such a policy within the Act. Right now, the state has a very minimal anti-degradation policy, and there is absolutely no methodology or procedure for evaluating an anti-degradation policy. We have a series, we have about 6 different items that we think the state should implement and start working toward. Fourth, and this kind of came up with in the 303D review process, we believe the state needs to improve its statistical, scientific, and analytical capabilities. The USGS has many gauging stations around the state, and a lot of times they are collecting very high-quality information at 15-minute increments, very good, really discrete parameters that need to be utilized by the state. But when we recommended using the dissolved oxygen parameters that were provided by USGS at 15-minute increments, the state said, oh, you know what? We don't have the capability of handling that kind of data set. So we believe that you all really need to beef up your science and look outside of the state. For example, Washington State uses the lowest dissolved oxygen reading that they get within a day to characterize that day. So there's a lot of different ways to subset, a lot of different ways to use that really robust data set that USGS is providing. Number 5, require annual soil tests for all concentrated animal feeding operations under both Regulation 6, individual or general, and Regulation 5. Right now, under Regulation 6, CAFOs are only required to do soil tests once every 3 years and only once every 5 years under Regulation 5. That is simply not often enough or adequate enough. It's not protective enough, especially in karst areas where you can have an overabundance, a very serious high concentration of phosphorus and nitrogen that affect rivers such as the Buffalo National River. Number 6, we advocate removing the Arkansas Phosphorus Index as the standard to determine the rates and limits of phosphorus levels, and we would like that replaced with agronomic rates. Agronomic rates are a very conservative, straightforward method of assessing whether there's too much phosphorus. The API is not transparent. It requires intensive calculations with a whole suite of parameters that may not be appropriate or available. So we advocate more transparency, a much more simple, straightforward method to assess phosphorus on these fields. 7, we'd like you all to implement a permanent moratorium on large and medium-sized CAFOs in the Buffalo National River. We don't believe the current 5-year moratorium is protective enough because it allows waste from outside sources to actually be brought into the Buffalo River watershed. There's no prohibition about that. We feel that that loophole needs to be closed. And finally, at least for this first draft, we'd really like you to replace your current E. coli limits with the recommended 2012 EPA recommended limits. I have a copy right here. Those limits would be more protective of the 1.46 million visitors we have every year to the Buffalo River. Even with these more stringent EPA guidelines, it still assumes or allows that 36 people per 1,000 that ingest water or come in contact with water could still be ill. So it's not a zero, it's not that everybody's not going to get sick. 35 are still allowed to be sick under these criteria, these more stringent criteria. So I will close with that. I'll provide a copy of these comments, and we'll be sending you some additional ones. Thanks for listening.
Okay, so we had one card. Does anybody else have any, would anybody else like to take advantage of today? There's still more time, but. Okay, anything, Caleb, was there anything else we wanted to go over? Okay, so again, please take one of these on the way out because it has the information that you're going to need to make additional comments. And we can memorialize those in the matrix on our through email. And again, we can get the comments through snail mail. And this is not formal like a Reg 2 comment period and so on, but we would like to get everything in by the 31st so we can summarize that and we can get that to the stakeholder work group. And please check back on the website so you can be aware of when those stakeholder work group meetings are going to start up. So thank you very much for attending, and thank you for your participation and listening.